Greetings and welcome to Mz.Rootz online education sessions. Let's begin the session by setting ourselves 3 learning objectives. The intention is, by the end of the session, you will be able to define the term African Diaspora. You'll also be able to compare and contrast between the African diaspora and human migrations. And lastly, we will conclude with the ability for you to be able to discuss why the African diaspora need an alternative curriculum. So we're going to be looking at why the African diaspora need this type of platform, a new way of looking at education, and a curriculum reform. To ensure you have a quality learning experience, I'm going to strongly recommend that you may need to consider purchasing a book, journal or folder for these sessions specifically. What that will enable you to do then is have a central place of written evidence of your knowledge. You will then be able to go back, remember and revise some of the information and knowledge that you've acquired during the times that you've spent doing these sessions. Consider buying yourself some nice pens, different colours, highlighters, to highlight key points of information. These are specific methods to help ensure you retain information, proven sciences on how the brain captures and retains knowledge. I'm also going to suggest that you create yourself an electronic folder on your system. So create yourself a folder on your laptop or on your PC and name that folder something relative to these sessions. For instance, you could name it Mz.Rootz online education sessions and begin to centralize any resources that you're going to be able to download from this platform. Then you'll have a centralized bank of resources where you can then retrieve knowledge that you may want to use in the future. For this session, you'll also be able to download 2 documents. The first one being the course content checklist. This in effect is an index system. For those of you who like hard copies, this is a perfect document for you to place at the beginning or at the front of your filing system, and it will act as an index system. I'll be indicating to you when we have completed certain modules, so it's quite satisfactory to tick when a certain module has been completed. You will be able to then look and see what you've achieved and how you're building your knowledge up, how you're building up a reference system of knowledge. You'll also be able to download a timeline. This timeline we're going to be referring to throughout all of these sessions, so you definitely need a copy of this for yourself. I will be indicating to you when we're going to be using the timeline. For those of you who like hard copies, again, it prints quite nicely, it's quite colourful. Well, not everybody likes hard copies and it can create cluster, so by having your electronic folder that I recommended earlier, centralise both these documents in that file. And I'll go back to saying also the checklist can be checked electronically as well. You can be saved in that checklist electronically and filling in the box electronically as and when you're making progress. For these documents, go to the description area of this YouTube session and select the link and you will be able to download that document straight to your PC, straight to your laptop. That document's yours. To begin with, it's imperative that we're all able to define the term African Diaspora. I have taken this definition directly from Merriam-Webster's dictionary, but I encourage you to look at several sources in order to affirm in your own mind's eye what this term means. So start off with Merriam-Webster, maybe compare it with what Oxford Dictionary says, and then contrast it with maybe an online dictionary. This is good research practice. So Merriam-Webster says, it's a term commonly used to describe the mass dispersion of peoples from Africa during the transatlantic slave trade. And this happened between the 1500s and 1800s. And during this time, millions of people were taken from Western and Central Africa. I'm going to repeat that. Millions of people were taken from Western and Central Africa. They were then taken to different regions throughout the Americas and the Caribbean. So the Americas would include North America, South America, and I'm going to highlight at this point that South America has the most densely populated population of the diaspora in the world. The Caribbean includes Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, and all those islands. For those of you who are not fluent with reading the world map, don't worry, we've got a whole module dedicated to that. What's more interesting is this: human migrations. Now, if you look at this diagram here, it highlights the fact that humans have been trotting this globe way before the transatlantic slave trade. Yes, the transatlantic slave trade is a specific moment in time where there was a mass movement of African peoples from the west and central areas of Africa. But there's a history before that which often doesn't get told, and it's missing from curriculum, and it's missing from modern day mindsets, and it's valuable. Let's take a look. This area here that I'm circling highlights Ethiopia and the birthplace of humanity. Science, anthropologists, historians found the first human remains here. Europeans name that first human being Lucy. She's nearly 6 million years old, and I repeat, was found in Ethiopia, the cradle of humankind. From here, humans evolved and trod. This is according to history and science and what we've found when we've excavated. So we're talking about facts and logic here. But from here, Ethiopia, humans trodded here, which is the Middle East. Then they went round and trod into Australia, which we know are the Aborigines, and then up into Europe, which again, a type of evolution happened here. due to environmental effects, the weather, and then further north into colder regions, and all the way around into North America and then South America. We are going to be looking at each point of this process during this course in some decent detail. I think that's quite empowering, and everybody should know this. So, to summarise, all humans come from Africa, and even though there was a mass movement during the 15 and 1800s, Africans have always moved from one central point in Africa to the rest of the world. This is a good point now for me to introduce you to a timeline devised specifically for us, a timeline that's relevant and current, and was devised between me and a colleague back in 2012. You are able to download this timeline, so you have a hard copy or an electronic copy for yourselves, and we will be referring to this timeline throughout this course. So it would be a good idea for you to download it. If you have a printer and you like to touch things, you want to build up a file, you want to make a reference point, then you can print it. It prints in quite high quality. Or just have the electronic version where you can zoom in and zoom out. Again, it's of decent quality for you to do so. I'm going to highlight this point here. This solid black line represents a milestone in history when we had learnt certain things, so we began to record things differently. We've taken it away from the fact that we used to call this before Christ and after Christ. So this is non-religious based now. We're talking about time. And history should be read in one straight line. Even though things have happened and gone off on different tangents, if you like, time has always remained constant. And it's important for you to be able to compare and contrast what was happening in different parts of the world along one set period of time. So I say, this emboldened line here emphasizes a milestone in human development when we began to record things more efficiently, if you like. And we've named the point before it, before Common Era, and the point after it, after Common Era. And the time period we're talking about now is here. We're talking about human evolution and the human migrations. But we're also talking about here, the transatlantic slave trade. I want you to be conscious of all that time in between here and here. So much has happened to the world and the African continent between the period of the first migrations and the transatlantic slave trade. As I say, we're going to be going into more detail about time, and we're going to be looking at each milestone. As you can see, I've color coded each segment of time which I feel is important for us to look at, and the course will go into each area and detail what's happened during those time periods. I will be constantly reminding you and encouraging you to go and look at this information yourself. It's important that you carry out your own research and not take anybody's word as gospel. Even though you can trust me and I've spent time looking at this stuff, it's going to be more empowering if you look at this information again yourself, it'll do something and it'll resonate more solidly, and you'll take it on board as absolute. A reference point that we tend to overlook is one of the most powerful books in the world, the Bible. Now, I'm not a Christian, but I do love the Bible. You can read the Bible and it can be read as a history book, as a science book. There's allegory. You can read in between the lines. And really, ancient African history has been recorded in the first books of the Bible. We spoke about Ethiopia, haven't we, today, as the birthplace of humanity. And the Bible references this also. In fact, the Bible mentions Ethiopia in 20 verses and in 10 books. Yeah? And this is in the King James Version, which I know in the UK, coming from an Afro-Caribbean background, is probably the most widely read revised version of the Bible. And you can go grab your Bible off the shelf now and turn to Genesis chapter 2 verse 13, and it'll tell you. This is the story of the creation of the world and the universe, and it'll tell you here that, and I'll read it, the name of the second river, Gihon, the same is that it encompassed the whole land of Ethiopia. Yes, you see? So there we go, we've got evidence, not just in the Bible, but in science, in geography, in history, in anthropology. So we're looking holistically at this event and from many different sources, which makes the evidence almost absolute. It's imperative that you overstand and understand that the curriculum currently on offer by your nations have been devised by middle class, predominantly white men, who are so far removed and disconnected from people like you and I, and are governed by higher powers in government. So education is prescribed. We are part of a system that is fueled by economics. This system is called a capitalist society, or capitalism, and this is driven by money. We are the generators of money, of capital, of currency. Now, schools and places of education are designed to contribute back to this society. Education provisions, schools, colleges, unis, are in place to shape individuals ready for the workforce, ready to generate current, ready to generate capital. These places don't really care about your individual potential or your divine purpose or your true talents. What they do is they tap into your talents and shape you so you become almost a puppet to their system. This model of education has been replicated globally. So the provisions you see in the UK are very similar to the provisions you will see in America, even in Africa, in the Caribbean. And what they do is produce almost like a one-size-fits-all type package and apply that in their institutions and places of learning. There's very little flexibility within curriculums, and there's a lot of similarity across the globe in terms of how we are teaching our people. I am suggesting that due to the fact that we are heavily reliant on the national curriculum as a source and method to educate us, many of us have become disengaged, and this is having an impact on our communities. I have been compiling a bank of statistics from the year 2006 right up until present day. I'm going to be highlighting some of the challenges we face as a people with regard to education. Let's have a look at some current statistics and facts around education affecting this specific population of people. Now, as you know, I am British and my career was developed in the UK, so these statistics are around UK based residents. Well, I'm sure if I was to compare with American and Caribbean statistics, there'd be synergy. So let's take a look. Education statistics. Okay, so black pupils, together with Pakistan and Bangladeshi pupils, perform less well than white pupils throughout compulsory schooling. We've also got black Caribbean pupils show the greatest change in level attainment during compulsory schooling. Black Caribbean pupils are most likely to be excluded from school. This is 3 times more likely than their white counterparts. And black Caribbean pupils are overrepresented in pupil referral units. If you're not aware of what a pupil referral unit is, it basically is an education provision for students who get excluded from their mainstream schools. So they are kicked out of their mainstream schools and sent to a pupil referral unit where they get specialist support. They're supposed to get specialist support. Also, just to ensure that you're aware of compulsory schooling. So in the UK, you have to be attending school by law, or you have to access some type of schooling between the ages of 5 and 18. Compulsory means you have to. Okay, more stats. So, 28% of black Caribbean pupils in secondary school were recorded as having special educational needs. This means they need extra support with their learning. 22% were black African and 25% were recorded as black other. That is a huge population of people. Black Caribbean males are least likely to have a degree. This is 8% of the population. Black staff appear to be overrepresented in part-time lecturing posts and underrepresented in the more secure fractional posts. And last but not least, 4/5 of permanent exclusions are boys. Again, that is a huge fraction of permanent exclusions being black boys. An American professor by the name of Dr. Joy DeGruy has researched and studied and devised the notion of post-traumatic slave syndrome. Now, in her research, she details how this syndrome is a psychological condition due to the slave trade. Now, the slave trade lasted over 400 years. Fathom 400 years of being enslaved. This is generation after generation after generation. When you're enslaved for so long, you lose your identity, especially when it has been deliberately withheld from you. So this includes your language, any cultural practices, any spiritual practices, and any ties that you would have had with your family gone. We also have to be conscious that slavery is still quite recent. You know, as African people in the diaspora, we've only been free for 150 years. Now, the professor highlights that this syndrome has been untreated. So, when the slaves were set free, slavery was abolished. There was no counselling, and there was no rehabilitation, and there was no acknowledging that these people had suffered mental, physical, emotional and spiritual torture, but yet still left to go and deal with what was now a capitalist system. So this syndrome, we believe, has led to some of the conditions we see in society now, like self-hating and idolizing other cultures, not accepting who we are. You know, we have all sorts of issues with mental illness, crime, relationships, and even within our immediate families, we have deep-rooted issues. This is why we need a curriculum of our own. Let me know whether you agree with what I'm saying. Comment below, email me, post up on my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. As I said, I'm going to be tapping into you for motivation. I'm going to be drawing upon your energy as a motivational tool to keep doing what I'm doing. Are you following what I'm saying? Are you connecting with the theories? Let me know. Do you agree with the fact that I'm suggesting we need an alternative curriculum, specifically for people of African heritage and people who are in the diaspora? Let me know. Communicate with me. I need your energy. We are now coming towards the end of this session, but before we conclude, it's important that I check your learning. I need to ensure that you're going to retain this information. So at the end of each session, we'll have a short assessment. So here we go. First question. Are you able to state what is meant by the term African diaspora? Don't worry if you can't answer that question at this stage. The beauty of this platform is you can rewind the video and check your answers there. Next question. Between what dates approximately did the transatlantic slave trade occur? Again, if you've not retained this information, rewind the video, watch it again, the answers are there. What parts of Africa were Africans taken from during this period? Again, the answers are at the beginning of this video. I'm also going to continue to encourage you to be looking at other resources, so don't just be taking my word as gospel. Look in other areas such as books, documentaries. YouTube and the internet are very powerful resources to confirm your knowledge on these areas. Are you able to explain what is meant by human migrations? Again, you have the ability to create yourself a book and document the answers to these questions, or just have a conversation. Discuss this with your family, somebody else in the room. Next question. According to this theory, where is the birthplace of humanity? Next question. Approximately how old are the remains of the first human being? I'm going to add to that. Approximately how old are the remains of the first human being found? What was the gender of this first human being that they have found? I hope that makes sense. And last but not least, can you briefly discuss the theory of post-traumatic slave syndrome, also known as PTSS? Obviously, I know most of you haven't read the book, and probably this is the first time you've even come across the theory. But based on what you heard today in this session, can you briefly discuss the theory? I'm going to strongly recommend that you get this book and do further research on this syndrome also. Next question. Can you recognise the impact of the transatlantic slave trade upon the African diaspora today? Again, this can be something you document in a book where you've written down the answers, or verbalise it, have a conversation. I'm going to be really interested to see comments and feedback. Last question. Can you discuss why the African diaspora need an alternative curriculum? Again, I'm looking forward to receiving your emails. I'm looking forward to reading your comments. Well done to everybody that has sat through the whole session and completed the questions. I am proud of you, and you should be proud of yourself. That concludes our very first formal session. If you enjoyed it, let me know. Share, like, comment, so I can gather that feedback. I hope to see you next session so we can continue to build on our knowledge.